morning. Before we begin, I will go over the emergency response plan for this room. In an emergency, everyone must evacuate through the nearest safe exit. Those seated in the gallery take direction from security to evacuate. Council takes direction from the meeting clerk. After evacuating the room, please proceed to a stairwell. Take the stairs to ground level and evacuate the building through the doors marked emergency exit and go to the muster point. Do not take an elevator or walk through the city room. Anyone with limited mobility should identify themselves to security or the meeting clerk during an evacuation. Finally, please speak with security or the meeting clerk if you require first aid. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the March 14th, 2025 meeting of Utility Committee. And I would like to start by acknowledging that we meet today on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory in the Métis homeland, and acknowledge the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Blackfoot, the Nakota Sioux, as well as Métis and Inuit, and now settlers from around the world. I'll start with a roll call. Councillor Paquette.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Jans. Councillor Salvador.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Stevenson.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Jan. Sorry, I had an audio issue. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Councillor Tang.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see, we're also joined by Councillor Wright.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Rutherford.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councillor Knack.
Good morning.
Good morning, and we are joined in chambers also by the Utility Advisor, Mr. Beckett.
Good morning.
Good morning. I would take a motion for adoption of the agenda with changes.
Yes, I can move that the March 14th, 2025 Utility Committee meeting agenda be adopted with the following changes. Additions of 7.1, the Coronation Eco Station expansion, 7.3, Air Products franchise fees considerations, and the deletion of item 9.1, Blatchford Renewable Energy Utility Funding Opportunity.
I just want to test the deletion. Is everybody comfortable with the deletion? It's my understanding that we were going to talk about the deletion before at the meeting, but if committee members are fine, then I'm fine as well. Well, if I don't know, because it's private. So unless I hear any objections, then we'll just consider the deletion as part of the changes too. Okay, please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Approval of the minutes.
I'll move approval of the minutes from the January 27th, 2025 Utility Committee meeting.
Thank you. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Thank you. Protocol items. I'm not aware of any. Selection of items for debate. I'm happy to take them, but
I'll select item 7.1 on behalf of Councillor Rutherford.
Councillor Tang.
7.3, please.
Councillor Paquette.
I didn't quite hear what Councillor Tang said. 7.3
Yes.
is what you selected? Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Anything further? Be somebody willing to move all other items?
So moved.
Thank you. Please vote.
have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried.
Would you like me to read back the item that was
Yes,
passed?
please.
Thank you, Chair Cartmel. This morning, Utility Committee has passed the recommendation in item 7.2, Christmas tree collection.
Great, thank you. Request to speak, we have one. So I can move that. I move that we'll hear from Mr. Ian Murray from Air Products in person on item 7.3. Please vote. No. We'll let you know. Yeah, we got a bit more to do yet. Please have a seat. It'll be a bit. Thank you. Yeah.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. There are no requests for specific time on the agenda, but I'm going to suggest perhaps we do bring 7.3 forward and do it first. I'll move that we bring item 7.3 forward. Please vote.
We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. That is carried. Are there any councillor inquiries today? Not aware of any. Very good. That takes us to item 7.3, and I think we'll start with a presentation from administration or from EPCOR or both. Yeah? Okay, please come on down.
So good morning, committee. Administration was tasked to provide a report outlining the process, including any advantages and disadvantages to forgive the requirement of Air Products to pay franchise fees on their new water supply pipe. Today we are here to discuss our report responding to this motion. In terms of quick introductions from administration today, we have myself, Harm Rai, Branch Manager, Financial Services, Stephen Chung, Finance Director, Utilities and Land Development, as well as members of his team, and representatives from Legal Services and Urban Planning and Environment to help address questions from committee members. We also have delegation from EPCOR to assist today as well. From EPCOR, we have Saqib Chaudhry, Director, Regulatory and Business Planning, and Craig Bonneville, Director, Engineering and Technical Services. So we don't have a presentation today, but I wanted to take some time to provide some opening remarks and briefly summarize the key points from the report. Usually my opening remarks wouldn't be this long and robust, but since the report was late to the agenda, I thought it would be appropriate to go over some of the report highlights. So Air Products is currently constructing a hydrogen energy complex in northeast Edmonton near Strathcona County. This facility will require large volumes of treated wastewater, or what in the report is referred to as processed water, to support its operations, which will be provided by Aero Utilities and supplied through dedicated water supply pipeline. Aero provides transmission and treatment of wastewater for municipalities surrounding the city of Edmonton. This pipeline will span primarily through Fort Saskatchewan and Strathcona County before reaching the Air Products facility in Edmonton. As the facility is located in Edmonton, EPCOR will bill Air Products for processed water services. This will include the flow-through costs incurred by Aero, which will be passed on to EPCOR, as well for the cost incurred by EPCOR. It is currently expected that the water services will need to be provided to Air Products by September 2026. Based on the city's water services franchise fee agreement with EPCOR, the franchise fee is equivalent to 8% of franchise revenue. At this time, an estimate of the water franchise fee charged to Air Products for processed water services is not known. This is because Aero and EPCOR are both in the process of developing new water services utility rates for processed water services, which is unique and a new water service. Once the rate is determined, it will be used to determine the utility revenue collected from Air Products, to which the 8% franchise fee would be applied. The city will continue to work with EPCOR and legal services to understand the financial impact of utility billings to Air Products and the applicable franchise fee amount. EPCOR is planning to return to Utility Committee in the first quarter of 2026 for approval of the new utility rate for processed water. This would be in advance of September 2026, when the processed water services to Air Products should commence. Utility Committee could finalize their decision on the franchise fee exemption for Air Products at that time, when more information and better estimates of the franchise fee is available. In the report, we discussed potential options. Our advice would be to leave the franchise fee and utility process intact and not exempt a customer or a subset of customers from the franchise fee process. If the desire is to provide financial support to specific organizations or a subset of customers, this is better done, in our opinion, through grants or a grant program, which provides a formalized, transparent process with specific criteria that need to be met for grant eligibility. This also aligns closely with Action 8 of the Industrial Investment Action Plan, which is specifically geared toward providing incentives to attract and retain specific industrial sectors, potentially through a grant program. Thank you, and we'll be happy to answer questions after the speaker.
Great, thank you. I'll go to you, Mr. Beckett, but I guess I'm curious, would you rather offer comments now or after the speaker has spoken?
I think after the speaker.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Beckett. Okay, I appreciate that. So then we'll call then Mr. Murray down, please, to offer his comments.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Mr. Murray. You'll have 5 minutes to offer your comments. The little lights on the dais in front of you should be working. We'll offer advice. It'll be green for 4 minutes, yellow for 1, and red when the 5 minutes are up. When you're finished your comments, and anybody on committee and any of the councillors joining us will then have the opportunity to each take 5 minutes and ask questions of you. So it will be a bit of a dialogue. And I think that's all I have to offer you on that. So please proceed. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of the 5-minute deadline, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and other folks, and then jump ahead to our recommendation, and then circle back and give the background, okay? Just so I get the recommendation in. So my name is Ian Murray. I'm the president and owner of the consulting firm IMC. I've been asked to speak on behalf of Air Products. IMC has been working for Air Products for over 20 years and have been involved in many aspects of this new hydrogen project, including the water supply. Rachel Smith, the Vice President for Canada, has responsibilities that include Eastern Canada, and she has had to travel there to meet with customers impacted by the tariffs. So she asked me to pass on her regrets for not being able to attend. I am pleased to introduce Haseen Haroon of Air Products, who is in attendance here for this event. I'll jump ahead to the recommendation. Based on our analysis and also the review of the City Administration's report, we recommend that there be structured a new class of utility ratepayers that's structured in a narrow manner based on these unique factual circumstances, and in order to allow this to not set a precedent, and while also ensuring fairness and competitiveness for Edmonton to attract investment. We think it's appropriate for the administration to work with EPCOR and Air Products to fully understand the unique characteristics and to develop this new utility ratepayer class. We think the ratepayer class should then be designated to pay the nominal rate by avoiding an exemption. We think you could avoid certain legal complications that are referenced in the administration's report, and therefore meet the goals without setting a precedent and without creating legal complications. So I'll circle back now and provide some background. Air Products is one of the largest industrial gas companies in the world with 60 years of hydrogen experience. They have operations in Alberta and Ontario and have been the main producer of hydrogen for sale in Alberta since opening the first plant about 20 years ago. They have 3 plants in Alberta, a hydrogen pipeline, and the new facility that's under construction. Air Products is building two of the first two blue hydrogen plants in the world, one in Edmonton and one in Louisiana. This plant in Edmonton will manufacture blue hydrogen by utilizing abundant natural gas and sequestering the CO2 underground. The product will be sold primarily in the gaseous form to refineries, with some volume being sold in liquid form to various customers. Imperial Oil's new renewable diesel plant will take about half of the output. The project will generate 2,500 construction and engineering jobs, and property taxes will be approximately $1.3 million per year. The facility will receive the reused water from the new Aero facility located north of our plant. The Aero water facility will cost approximately $150 million after considering government grants. The facility is in Edmonton. The water therefore has to be sold to EPCOR, who will then resell it to Air Products. Using reused water, this avoids the need to take additional fresh water from the North Saskatchewan River. The EPCOR pipe was that would transport the water at the end of its transmission. It's approximately 400 meters, or only 4% of the length of the total water pipeline. Air Products is paying for the full pipeline itself and turning it over to Air Water and EPCOR. The issue at hand is Air Products' request for relief from the 8% franchise fee that is applied to the value of the water purchased and paid to EPCOR, which then remits it to the City of Edmonton. This fee is estimated to be about $750,000. The costs are paid entirely by Air Products and Air Water. EPCOR does not face any costs or risk. Air Products has to pay Air Water a price that includes the various costs plus some return on capital. There are certain issues raised in the administration's report we just want to point out. While Aero has agreed not to charge a specific franchise fee, they are charging a return on capital. We understand the return on capital will be very similar to what the franchise fee would be, although this is still under negotiation. The Aero capital cost is not minimal as outlined in the report. It is in fact very substantial at $150 million. Air Products is directly spending about $140 million on various infrastructure associated with the project. I think I see the red light. So
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Marie, but there will be questions for you, so there'll be an opportunity to offer further comments, I'm sure. So I will first go to Councillor Tang.
Sure, great, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Murray, for being here, and to your colleagues from Air Product. Maybe just building on that last train of thought, you're still under negotiation with Aero that will be comparable to their franchise fee, which according to the report is around 8%. Did you work, and the report didn't sort of land on what that estimate would be because there's more work that needs to be done from administration and EPCOR, but what do you anticipate? Like how much are we talking about here?
So because this project has delayed, the discussions with Aero were not finished, and it's been fairly complicated because their project, it turned out to be far more expensive than they anticipated. And they also overbuilt the project beyond our needs. So they're facing significant costs that they're incurring that are not being passed to us. So we're probably half their capacity, right? So they're facing some stress associated with this project. And as a result, some of these discussion items are still ongoing.
Okay.
We don't know the final number that will settle with them, but we're flexible to talk to them about their problems.
Sorry, I meant like how much are we talking about on the EPCOR side? Like this, the subject of this whole discussion is around exemption.
Right, so in terms of, you're asking what cost EPCOR incurs?
Or you're asking to be exempted from the franchise fee from our side, for the City of Edmonton side. How much are we talking about?
Okay, the cost that we would pay based on the 8% franchise fee, based on the volumes, and a ballpark estimate of the price we're paying to Aero Water is $750,000 per year, right? So that's the incremental amount approximately that we're talking about here.
And this will be on top of other fees, including property taxes, et cetera.
Right, so we pay about 1.3 million in property taxes. In this case, we're concerned that because EPCOR and the city are not actually taking any cost or risk, that it's basically like a 40% increase in our property taxes.
Right. And on top of that, you have to kind of work out this other piece, an agreement with
Right.
this other utility company.
Right, and I'd suggest this problem may not just be ours. I would suggest other industrial entities that may invest in this corner of Edmonton may find that they're closer to the Arrow Water plant than to the EPCOR plant, and this problem may reoccur, and it would be simpler for you to deal with this in a separate class of ratepayers at this time
Yeah.
that would apply to us and the others that end up in the same predicament.
Yeah, and between the time when this issue was brought forward and now, have you had any conversation with administration or EPCOR?
We've had conversations with EPCOR.
Okay.
But we haven't initiated a discussion with the administration until, we started this process.
And then in the report, it talks about a bit of a timeline. There's these options. The timeline will be until Q1 2026. That to me sounds like kind of no matter which option we go for, it's not going to be immediate. It's going to be some time into 2026. Does that type of timeline? How does that work?
Well, we'll ultimately live with whatever respect the decision of council, obviously. It would be better to at least have the principles resolved sooner, so we have sort of a boundary and an expectation as to what our cost is.
Yeah.
Because we've already faced the total water bill for all the capital, including, the Arrow Water plant, and our plants, our infrastructure, is about triple the original estimate.
Okay.
So there's a fair amount of pain as it relates to the cost of water at this point, in this project. Like, Air Products is putting up about 100 million, for a pumping station and the pipeline.
Yeah.
Plus, this 150 million net number that Arrow's putting up. And the total of the two is about triple what we thought. So another 750,000 a year is just kind of additional pain. And it would be nice to know in principle that we can get to a different number that's more reasonable. And after reading the city administration's report, we understand the complication of an exemption. So maybe we'd like to change course and say, how about a nominal rate
Yeah.
that doesn't cause that?
Just one last question. I have 20 seconds. The processed water won't start flowing until the pipe is constructed. What's your timeline for that, for the pipeline?
Well, it looks like the latest information from Air Products that was presented to EPCOR was for this to be September 2026.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. No? Okay. Okay. So a couple of questions then. The $750,000 a year estimate, that's being arrived at by applying an 8% charge to the projected cost of water from Arrow. Is that right?
Yes.
So you're effectively, the Arrow water bill is X and 8% of X is $750,000.
Correct.
But you haven't had a conversation about what the EPCOR cost of water might be to you.
Our understanding with EPCOR is they were going to take the Arrow cost and pass it on with the 8% surcharge. So that's essentially what we've modeled.
Yeah, so I think we need to have clarity on that. So, when I get my water bill at home, I pay a franchise fee because I'm buying the water from EPCOR, but I'm not sure that that's exactly the flow of dollars here in terms of who you're actually buying dollars for. So there might be something in that class. The other question I have is on the capital cost. I'm sorry, I'm just going to maybe ask it again in a different way. You've got Air Products has a $150 million capital expenditure, which is one part pump, one part pipe. Is that fair?
No, the 150 is the Arrow cost, which we ultimately pay in rates, right? So their capital cost gets amortized over many years, but so we're essentially paying the $150 million cost of the new Arrow facility. On top of that, 150 Air Products is directly spending, and largely has spent already, a further $100 million on the pump station. So the two together is $250 million.
Two is 250, so 100 million CapEx now and 150 million effectively paid through rates over time.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. And that 150 million that's going back to Arrow, that's not 100% of their cost. They have additional CapEx costs that would go to other ratepayers. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so at this stage, the 150 is their total cost. Our rates, I should correct myself, our rates are approximately paying for about half of that capital.
Okay.
So our rates would have baked into it approximately 75.
So they're recovering about 75 million
From
of
us.
their cost from you, and they anticipate to recover the other $75 million from future connections to that pipe. Yeah?
Which they don't have at the moment.
Right, but which they anticipate, just given the proximity of unserviced properties to their pipe. That's
One would hope.
one, yeah, well, they would hope.
And there's also a possibility that the Air Products expansions could use up some of that
Oh,
capacity.
okay, so there might be some of that too.
Yes.
Okay, I think those are all my questions. Thank you. Councillor Salvador?
Yeah, I thank you, and thank you for being here this morning. I think most of my questions have been answered. But just to be, to be crystal clear then, so the recommendation on your end would be to develop that new rate. It sounds like that work is already underway for processed water on EPCOR's side. Is there anything else missing, I guess? It sounds like that process is starting to churn.
So I'm sorry, what specifically?
So is there anything, so when I read the report, it looks like there is currently work underway to develop and propose a new separate water service utility rate for processed water. Is there
Yes.
anything, so that process is underway, it seems like. I think there could be some further conversations and sort of integrating
so
Air Products into that, but is there anything else?
No, I think we just understood from our discussions with EPCOR that for there to be any change to the 8%, it was necessary to get direction from City Council. So that's why we came here, because we understand that neither EPCOR or the administration had any jurisdiction to make those decisions on their own.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Sohi?
Well, thank you so much for being here. So Arrow Utilities will supply will supply treated water to Air Products.
Yes.
And water that has been, it's a reused water. The original use of the water is, does that pay any franchise fees to the city of Edmonton?
I am not 100% sure the origin of the original water. I know that the Aero facility up until now was not in the business of producing reused or processed water.
Okay.
Right? So they took effluent, and they supplied raw water from the river.
What I
So
want to
this is a new
understand is
business
that,
for them?
yeah, I want to understand maybe if there's a double charge, right? If that water use had already paid a franchise fees, here we're using recycled water, are we charging again? That's what I want to understand.
Yeah, I think you're correct. Somebody somewhere paid a franchise fee on it. I know that where it came from, it's a bit complicated because, and I'm not an expert on this, but I understand EPCOR and Aero Water have a sharing agreement where they collect and share, the effluent systems. So I don't know. So it's hard to say whose fee it was paid.
Got it. And maybe this question we'll ask to administration, but is your understanding that the franchise fees that EPCOR charges is based on how much water is being consumed, not just the length of the pipe?
Yeah, it's based on volume, yes.
The volume, okay. Do you know if Strathcona County charges any, I know they don't have a franchise fee that they charge, but do they charge any linear taxes on their pipes? Or do they charge any equipment and machinery tax on the pipe? Like if we were to, like what those charges do get transferred on to, if they do charge, I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that, but we can come back to you with some information.
Okay.
And some of that, the EPCOR folks may know about, but we just knew they weren't charging us a franchise fee because where we're located is not, you know, in their
Yeah.
within their
Yeah,
boundaries.
they may not be charging a franchise fee, but they may be charging machinery and equipment tax or linear tax on the pipe to Arrow utility. I don't know, but maybe we'll seek that clarity. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Murray, we have a very bureaucratic process here, as you might imagine. So when your turn is up, you no longer get to speak here. So is there anything else that you might want to add before you take your seat?
I think I would just point out that these are very unique circumstances, and we're not being critical
Right.
of EPCOR or the city. And we think it's just an issue of fairness and also, frankly, competitiveness for the city to deal with this. And I think we can deal with fairness and competitiveness issues and not set a precedent. And I think all those things are achievable, you know, based on, you know, going with a nominal rate for the franchise fee.
Yeah, there's weirdness in this exchange of water between utilities and one plant versus the other and that kind of a thing that might lead to, because they're unique circumstances, maybe there's a unique solution. Is that fair to say?
And we may not be the only one, though, right?
Right.
Because the location of that Arrow plant is pretty close to the Orem Industrial Park and some of your city of Edmonton. So, you know, this might happen again, right? It may not be just us, so there could be some, you know, value to the city to clarify this.
You may not be the only one. You may be just the first one.
Yeah, we've been the first one on lots of things, so every once in a
Fair
while
enough.
we deal with issues like this.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I don't think there's any more questions for you. Appreciate your comments. We'll go to Mr. Beckett and hear your comments, sir. Thanks for coming.
The utility geek in me is not comfortable with using utility rates to foster economic development. If the city desires to foster a particular economic development, they should do it directly, not through the utility rates. And so I think that's aligned with the city administration's recommendation. My understanding is that if EPCOR developed a separate rate for this particular project, and that's fine, they can do that, that's not an issue. There'd still be an issue with exempting it from the franchise fee, because the franchise fee is set by bylaw. So an aspect of using utility rates and the franchise fee to foster this economic development, and this is an engineer's interpretation of a legal document, is that the bylaw setting the franchise fee would have to be changed. And finally, I think there was a comment that EPCOR doesn't incur any costs associated with this particular project. They will incur ongoing operating and maintenance costs of their portion of the pipeline. And that would normally be factored into a specific rate if it's developed for this particular customer. So there's options to get to where the city wants to get, but my recommendation would be to avoid tinkering with utility cost of service approach to get there.
Sorry, something weird just appeared on my screen.
Apologies,
Yeah.
the scribe seems to be acting up. We will
Okay.
take
Okay.
care of that.
I thought I'd blacked out for an hour. Well, it came up asking me to vote, and I'm like, I'm not ready to vote on anything. Who was in the queue? I'm sorry. You selected this item, Councillor Tang. Why don't you go ahead, please?
And this is question to administration and the advisor, or can?
Yeah, I think we can have questions of both at this point. I tend to consider Mr. Beckett as part of the delegation, so.
Okay, great. I guess maybe I'll start with Mr. Beckett. Thanks for that. I feel like also I've heard you talk about some of the principles of utility rate setting, one of which is also fairness to ratepayers. Can you kind of speak to that principle in this context, as the speaker also raised that?
Well, fairness is kind of a hard thing to pin down sometimes. Every other consumer of water products in the city of Edmonton pays an 8% franchise fee. Is that fair? I think you have to look at it from that perspective. Exempting an individual customer from the franchise fee, putting aside the issues of how you would do that, leads to a bit of a slippery slope. Because if you do it once, you set the stage for many additional customers asking for the same treatment. On the way to work today, I drove by Labatt's. They consume a lot of water. If they were to ask for a break on the franchise fee and point to Air Liquid as the precedent for doing so, it would be a difficult conversation. Ultimately, I think you would deny the request, but you're setting yourself up for those kind of slippery slope.
Right. And certainly have thought about that, but I guess for me the difference is I don't think Labatt necessarily is using water from another supplier with infrastructure that is built, some parts of it outside of the city as well. I guess that's kind of where, like, yes, we all pay 8% franchise fee for using the infrastructure and the water within the city limits provided through EPCOR. So I guess I'm just curious about that. But then, I mean, I think your point about slippery slope too is like, people will point to this, even though it's not the same context, people will want that kind of, I guess, conditions applied.
Yeah, it all boils down to, in my mind anyway, to the purpose behind setting the franchise fee in the first place. And once it was set through the bylaw, is there room to make exceptions? And as I read the current bylaw, the answer is no.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe to administration, I think just, I wanted to just better understand the two options you have proposed in the report. At the beginning of the report, you talk about, of course, working on the new rate class for this specific situation. However, that's not one of the options you're recommending, even though you're working on, or I guess like, what's the difference between exemption versus creating a new class?
Yeah, so a couple of different things there. So EPCOR is, and Mr. Bonneville can speak to this in a second here, but EPCOR is developing a new rate to provide that particular service to Air Products. So it's a new service for processed water. So they're developing a rate for that based on whatever cost recovery they need. The exemptions we talk about is like, on top of that, we would apply an 8% franchise fee rate on top of whatever revenues collected through that rate. And so the exemptions we talk about are, how can you exempt that franchise fee if you want to provide relief to that franchise fee? So we talk about two options in the report.
Oh, I see. So this is not one or the other. I think I've been kind of interpreting this as, because I hear what they're requesting is a new class that would include the exemption, but you're saying we need a new class. On top of that, there's still the 8%.
Yes, there's going to be a new rate developed, a new class potentially, and that's going to generate revenue collected from Air Products through EPCOR. On top of that, the city, with accordance to your policy, you're going to charge an 8% franchise fee on that revenue that's generated based on that new rate. So the rate's going to happen regardless. And now we have to talk about the franchise fee that's collected through that.
Okay, so there's actually two issues then. Like, one, we have to figure out a class for this particular situation,
Right,
and then
which is going to happen. So it's not really an issue. Like, it's going to happen. And then on top of that, there's a franchise fee collected, and that's what you have to decide what you want to do with that franchise fee. And those
okay.
are the two options presented in the report. You could do it through a grant to
Yeah.
provide relief, or you could do an exemption to the franchise fee for this particular class. And like Mr. Beckett said, that comes with some challenges.
Right, and so the kind of this nominal rate that they're proposing is applying for that first issue, that when you work at whatever, like and not necessarily have to do with the franchise fee.
Right, I think Mr. Murphy provided an option there where when EPCOR is developing their rate, perhaps there's a discount or a subsidy to their rate, which was
see,
not,
okay.
we didn't discuss that in the report.
Okay, you know what, I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much. So to EPCOR, when you're developing this new rate, will you be applying all of the same rate principles that we generally apply when setting rates? So fairness, cost recovery.
Councillor Stevenson, yes, we will. And this rate, the establishment of this rate will be a little bit more straightforward than when we typically do, because the vast majority of the costs will be charged to us from Arrow. So our rate will reflect the cost from Arrow plus, and Mr. Beckett referenced it, whatever incremental cost EPCOR has, and it would be very minimal. It would reflect any O&M that's required on our portion of the pipe, as well as any costs for providing billing. And then the subject of today's conversation is, does the franchise fee apply? So that's how the rate would be constructed.
Okay, so I think, I'm probably just speaking to it, but I'll try to phrase some questions out of it. But so the new rate that's going to be set is going to reflect all the values that we want our utility rates to embody. And then it also seems that in taking that approach, the rate ends up becoming fairly nominal. It's not going to be a very high rate. Is that a fair guess?
I'm just going to backtrack on what I said. The EPCOR component of the rate will be, I'll say, nominal relative to the costs that are flowed through from Arrow to EPCOR, which we will pass on.
Yeah.
Hopefully that clarifies.
And it is only on those costs incurred by EPCOR that the franchise fee gets paid.
So the way the franchise fee agreement is written, the franchise fee is applied on all revenues. And I think this is the crux of the issue here, is that the request from Air Products is, should the franchise fee be applied on the total revenues billed by EPCOR to Air Products, which would include the cost charged from Arrow to EPCOR.
So maybe just to Mr. Beckett, is that a gap then in our bylaw in terms of charging franchise fees for sort of flow-through revenue from other utilities? Or no, I don't know if Arrow is a utility, but...
Well, a lot of EPCOR's costs today are flow-through costs. They purchase natural gas, they purchase electricity. So the fact that they're essentially purchasing this water rather than processing it themselves, it really, in my mind, doesn't make any difference.
But it seems like natural gas is an input for them producing their services, whereas this is someone else providing the services that they normally provide.
Or you could say it's an input to them providing a service to the customer.
Okay, interesting. So maybe just going back. But sorry, just for my understanding, does EPCOR purchase other direct inputs? So again, water that it provides to Edmontonians, is it purchasing that?
Yeah, so maybe I could use a bit of an example of how this project actually came to be, which may help address your question. So there are various options when this was initially presented to us to provide water service to this facility. We could have provided simply potable water for them to use as processed water. However, our experience is that perhaps a better option was to use recycled wastewater. The Gold Bar plant already provides that service to a customer in Strathcona County, but still from Gold Bar, where we treat our treated wastewater further and send it to that customer. In this case, because of the location of the Air Products facility, it's a good example of regional planning where it made more sense for Arrow to provide this water. So we still have to purchase that from Arrow in order to provide the service we require in the franchise to this customer.
Okay, so to wrap my head around this a little bit more, does the customer in Strathcona County pay for that recycled wastewater? Do they pay franchise fee?
So in the case of that agreement, that was actually created even before the Gold Bar plant was transferred to EPCOR, but that's actually constructed as a commercial agreement between Strathcona County, now EPCOR, and the customer. So it's built slightly different.
And then when we treat water, we put it back, it's normally waste product, right? Or not waste, but it's not, we don't get any revenue for it, it just goes back into the river.
Yeah, so at a wastewater plant, once it's treated and meeting those quality requirements, it's discharged into the river. In this case, Arrow is capturing a portion of it, treating it further before it gets sent to Air Products because they require a higher quality water for their process than just normally municipally treated wastewater.
Okay, thank you. I'm out of time.
Thank you. So we are joined this morning by grade 6 students from Dr. Margaret Ann Armour School in Ward Pahaseman, which it is my privilege to represent. So good morning. Hello. Are you just here for the day? Just for the morning? Just for the morning. Well, welcome to Utility Committee. They are led by their teacher, Ms. Gentil. Is that right? Yeah, nice to see you. We're talking about how much people should pay for water. So it's really, really interesting and really exciting. You're probably going to want to cancel the rest of your morning to listen in on this particular conversation. So these are important conversations, and you know, this is all part of building a city that we all get to live in. So thanks for coming, and maybe we'll get a chance to chat later. Mayor Sohi.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you, kids. I just want to make sure that this is to Mr. Beckett. Like, you creating a separate, different rate is fine, right?
That's right. That's normal course of business.
Right, and that will be done based on the fairness principle, user pay, other principles, and it may be lower than what other users may pay. Those are kind of all fair things to do under a utility system.
That's correct.
Right. I think where I understand your concern is, which I share that concern, is that when you start subsidizing economic development activities through franchise rate exemptions, there's a lack of transparency in it. Is that what it is? Like, or is not the proper tool to be using?
Lack of transparency is part of it.
Yeah.
The issue is whether the city views its utilities as something that can be used to foster economic development.
Right.
As I said earlier, the regulatory purist in me says, don't do that.
Mm-hmm,
but
yeah, but if we want to, we have other tools available.
Yes.
One of them is create a grant funding or property tax exemptions, which we have utilized in the past.
Yes.
Okay, so those would be more clear, appropriate, transparent tools available. Maybe to EPCOR, does again, coming back to Councillor Stevenson's question, I need clarity. Like, are you double charging franchise fees on a water that has been already paid a franchise fee somewhere else?
No, we're not. The rate that will be charged from Arrow to EPCOR will not include any franchise fee charged by the County of Strathcona or the City of Edmonton.
Oh, I see, okay. Does County of Strathcona how does they recoup their cost or linear of allocating or setting aside this land? Because this is a linear infrastructure. Do they get they don't get franchise fees, but do they get any linear taxes or any machinery or equipment tax on the pipe in their county?
Yeah, Mayor, we actually don't know that.
Oh.
That would be a question probably to Arrow and the County of Strathcona.
Right.
Certainly the pipeline from the Arrow facility runs mostly through the County of Strathcona, as
Yeah.
Mr. Murray indicated, before it crosses that municipal boundary to service Air Products. We've
Right.
already installed small, if you will, stub connections for servicing both on the
Yeah.
potable water process and process wastewater.
Like, it's clear on the EPCOR side that you have that piece of infrastructure on which you recoup your cost, and then you charge an 8% franchise fees that comes to the city as part of the agreement. But I want to understand that if County of Strathcona is benefiting from this pipe, right, then are we kind of cross-subsidizing their revenue by exempting?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the case. Arrow has a wastewater trunk system, bringing wastewater from their municipal customers, be that Sturgeon County, St. Albert, Strathcona County, Leduc, and so on, that run through various road right-of-ways outside the city of Edmonton.
Got it,
And
yeah.
again, so that's, if those counties charge a cost, and that is just a cost to Arrow to set
Got
their
it,
rates for their customers.
But you see, like Air Products, we're grateful that they're investing in our city, and we want to support that kind of industrial growth, which I am very passionate about, because we have been losing our share of the industrial growth. So we need to figure out what is the best way to encourage and incentivize. So any thoughts? Maybe I'll come back for a second round. I really want to understand what is the cleanest, transparent way to do it. I think we need to figure out a way to do it, but I just want to understand what is the clean. Maybe I'll come back after for my second round.
Sure, yeah, and I can just quickly speak to that, and I think, like, we agree, the Industrial Investment Action Plan speaks to this. There's, like, to incentivize industries. Action 8 speaks to that a bit. And, like, so what, in the report, what we say is, like, a grant would probably be the most transparent and easiest way to do this.
Got it. Okay, good. I'll come back.
Okay, so grants have to be approved every year.
Correct.
Right. So that does not offer security or, well, effectively security to Air Products. Because, you know, a year later, the grant is canceled and the fees are applied, right?
Correct. Like, there's ways you could do a multi-year grant that gets renewed once every 5 years or something like that. But yeah, typically they have a time limit set on them.
So let's take an example. Let's take a few different examples here. So water is sold in the city of Edmonton. The city of Edmonton applies a franchise fee to that, and EPCOR attaches it to the bill. People pay, and the franchise fees are then transferred back to the city, correct? That's the literal flow of dollars.
Correct.
So if the city of Edmonton changed, as an example, the franchise fee rate from 8% to 4% as a principle or policy of council, EPCOR has no part of that. That is a council decision, correct?
Correct.
And it is city revenue.
Yes.
And that's applied to EPCOR revenue or EPCOR operating costs? Like, it's 8% of what?
It's 8% of EPCOR revenue. It's built into our rate, Councillor.
So it's revenue, though. Okay. So Arrow is a wastewater treatment company, essentially, right? They
Wastewater treatment, and they also have some wastewater collection pipes as well in their system.
Sure, but effectively they collect wastewater, treat it, and put it back into the river.
That's right, for their regional customers, yes.
So this is a found opportunity. Build a pipe, collect revenue to provide not potable but treated water that can be used for process.
Yeah, I would say we've been collaborating with Arrow for a number of years.
Sure.
To try and get the best solution for this customer.
Yeah, no, that's not my question. Yeah. My question is, what does Arrow do? That's what Arrow does.
Yes.
They do wastewater treatment,
yes.
Right? EPCOR sells water to other municipalities. There's no franchise fee on that sale. Like when EPCOR sells water to Vegreville doesn't pay a franchise fee to EPCOR or the city. They buy water and then they do something with it.
That's right, because the purpose of the franchise fee is to give EPCOR exclusive right In a practical sense, it means we can utilize road right-of-ways, do our work within the city. And so when we sell wholesale water to a regional customer, that's kind of
Right.
not the case because it leaves that boundary.
So a class of ratepayer, because it's not property taxes that pay these things, it's rates. So a class of ratepayer could be developed that is very narrowly defined as ratepayers that are purchasing water through EPCOR from another source. We could develop that ratepayer class.
Yeah, I think early on we recognized that we needed to create a new class of ratepayer because of essentially the source of water. It's not coming from our potable treatment plants. They shouldn't have to pay those costs, of course. It's being acquired from some other source, in this case, Arrow. Yeah.
So we could define another class.
Yes.
Could we then take our franchise fee law policy, which is a city thing, and say that a franchise fee rate, perhaps a different rate, could be applied to net revenue or operating cost of the particular piece of pipe that falls within the city of Edmonton? Are those changes to the algorithm of calculation possible?
So it's your policy, so you can
Yeah.
determine the franchise fee however you see fit.
Could we amend our franchise fee policy to say that on this new class of property, we're going to charge X percent on net revenue or operating cost or some very modest subset that represents the proportionality of this length of pipe that's in Edmonton versus the other, simply by creating amendments to the franchise fee bylaw?
Yeah, by creating amendments to the franchise fee bylaw and the franchise fee agreement, you could. And I might hand it over to Tracy to expand on that a bit.
Yeah, no, Mr. Rye is correct. You could do that.
So that's a path. New class, new rate, new denominator, consistency, not something that needs to be renewed by council every year or two, like a grant would. And we would very narrowly define it to this particular situation where there's shared infrastructure. We could do that.
Yes, you could do that, and I think.
How long would that take?
So I'll hand that over to Tracy to speak about that, but I just want to highlight one of the risks of doing that, or the considerations you might have to think about is what Mr. Beckett was saying. So you could do that for one customer rate class. It opens up the discussion for other customers to ask for something similar. So it just expands that discussion. So you may have future discussions from other customers saying, hey, we would be interested in something like that as well. So that's the only thing I'd want to highlight there. And in terms of how long that would take, maybe Tracy can speak to that.
Yeah, Councillor Cartmel, I think the key piece in what you're saying there is that new rate needs to be set, that new class that you're talking about, and then amendments to that can be made in the franchise agreement. So, somewhat simply, sorry. As we highlighted in the report, we need to work with EPCOR to assess further whether or not those amendments need to go to the AUC, so that might also have a timing implication. So sorry, I don't have an exact.
No, I'll have to come back to that because I'm out of time. Thank you, though. Councillor Jens?
Yeah, thank you. If I can ask our utility advisor, I'm just trying to think of if there's another example. Like, what about when the city annexed land? Was there any, I'm trying to find if there's any colliery or like a equivalent unique circumstance such as this.
I can't think of any. When the city annexes land, it becomes part of the city, and the franchise agreement and bylaw applies in that case. So no, I can't think of any real parallel to what you're suggesting.
And maybe same question to EPCOR. Is there any other time where there's been an acquisition, some sort of or a shift in ownership?
Not with respect, not in the context of the franchise fee discussion. For example, though, when the most recent annexation occurred to the south, some of the water infrastructure in the new annex lands we acquired from the respective water commission or county or whatever, because then it was now in the city of Edmonton, and it was our asset to maintain and operate and invest in.
Back to the utility provider. If a exemption was created or a new criteria was created, am I correct in understanding that all other users of the utility would be bearing the delta in the cost? $1 from A not paid becomes $1 spread out over everyone else?
It would actually be the taxpayers who would feel the burden. If the city is collecting a lower franchise fee from a specific customer, then city revenue is decreased.
Is there any other adjustment through the EPCOR dividend or through EPCOR essentially? Does EPCOR provide any grants or subsidies or backfilling or anything else internal to EPCOR?
I assume that's a question to EPCOR. I have no...
yeah, pardon me, to EPCOR.
Yeah. Councillor Jans, the answer to that question is no.
Right, okay. Mr. Chair, if I may just speak to it quickly, I support the recommendation of the administration, and I also support the conversation of my colleagues about trying to figure out some sort of a grant process as part of our industrial
Councillor
development
Jans,
strategy.
there's going to be a motion in the works, so you can speak to the motion when a motion's actually put on the floor.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, no worries, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you. So interesting conversation. Let me put this into where I am so I can ask my question, and that is, there's the potential of reworking this fee specifically for air products. There's the potential of an overall sort of subclass or new class. And then there's the potential of a grant program. And then there's a potential for administration to go back and work on a wholesale sort of reworking of what we are doing going forward, paired with the industrial action plan. To administration, I guess, do I have those options correct?
I think so, Councillor Paquette. There's a rate that's going to be developed, so that's going to happen for this new customer and this.
That's happening anyway.
That's going to happen. That needs to happen. And there's a franchise fee that will be collected on the revenue generated from that rate. And so we need to the discussion today is that franchise fee amount. Is it the right amount? And if it needs to be reduced or exempted, what's the best process to do that? Do you start getting into the franchise fee agreement and creating clauses for exemption, or do you leave the franchise fee agreement whole and pure and do this through some kind of other relief like a grant program?
Right. Okay. And obviously there are pros and cons to each approach. Some of the pros are better for one party than the other, but the goal is to find something that's equitable and fair for everyone across the board. And so I guess what I'm looking for is sort of an analysis, and maybe this has to go back for that analysis, but I'm kind of looking for an analysis on considering all of those factors and this request before us. I don't think we can look at this request as a one-off. We have to look at it, as more of a holistic question overall. So from administration, what would be your best advice going forward in addressing this question? Because I think, as I said, it may not be useful, because then we may find ourselves in a series of one-offs. So just thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you've summarized that really well, Councillor Paquette, and that's what we've mentioned in the report as well, that there's implications of exempting the franchise fee through the franchise fee agreement, and that is the precedent it might set for other customers to ask for something similar, and it can be a slippery slope, just like Mr. Beckett said. Not that it's right or wrong, but that's just an implication of that. And
Yeah.
then, right, and the grant program, it's transparent, but on the same basis as Councillor Cartmel was saying, it's something you'd have to revisit on a periodic basis.
Which has its pros and cons as well.
As pros and cons, like, it's a very transparent process, and you can increase or decrease that grant program. There's criteria that can be very specific towards the specific customers that you want to target. That's the advantage of a grant.
Right. We could say no. We may not say no because of the implication. Okay. So, all right. So I'm very curious to hear what the rest of the questions will be, because I think that we should probably, and I'll just get your thoughts on this, be looking at more of a broader based examination here, so that not only can we find fairness for Air Products today, but for all future kind of asks that may unfold. And we would probably want to manage how those asks come in through the framework that we set up. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this has been a really helpful conversation, and I just want to make sure I'm getting this absolutely right. And it's a funny way to phrase it, but EPCOR is not selling water products to Air Products. They're selling transmission services. Is that a fair summary? Like, the water isn't EPCOR's, but the pipes are.
We are purchasing water from Arrow. And then in turn selling it to Air Products. There are some small segments of pipeline that we also will own and have minor costs on top of that. And to give an order of magnitude, it's I think the report says about 17.7 million liters per day, so it's not an insignificant amount of water that this facility needs.
Yeah. But again, the water that you are purchasing is not in any, it doesn't incur any other costs to the utility.
To EPCOR, no.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's maybe emotions in the works, which makes sense to me. So yeah, I'll save it for speaking. I'll speak to it. But I just want to circle back. I think I heard from our speaker a desire today to see a commitment in principle to this approach of having the other rate. You don't require any further direction from us, correct? That work will happen. There's agreement and direction as needed?
Correct. We don't require any further direction.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Well, I look forward to speaking to the motion at the correct time.
Thank you. Come on up. Sorry, Mayor Sohi.
Thank you. So the $750,000 figure is more of an estimate at this time, right? It is not a cost that Air Products is currently paying. They're estimating this how much they will pay based on the formula that is currently in place.
Correct. They've estimated the total revenue that EPCOR will, or what EPCOR will charge Air Products, and would have applied 8% to that.
Got it. But if you were to develop a different rate as you're proposing, then that may not be $750,000. Might be far less than that.
No, I think the framework of the rate that Air Products has discussed, like, it's consistent with EPCOR's thinking. So EPCOR will take the costs charged to EPCOR from Arrow, and we will add whatever incremental costs EPCOR has and charge that to Air Products. I think the question is should, within the rate, should the franchise fee be 8%?
Okay, I see. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And that's a decision that we could make as part of an industrial growth strategy, that any incremental new development coming into the city, we charge them half of the rate what we charge to other customers, or exempt them for 10 years or 15 years, right? But those are the kind of conversation that we need to have in order to be flexible and provide these kind of opportunities. Maybe, I don't know if industrial growth strategy folks are here. What is their thinking about implementing and really doing these kind of creative work in order to attract investment into ours,
Yeah, I think
within our
we
boundaries?
have Alyssa here who could speak to that a bit.
Because I think what I'm concerned, but I think we are kind of being stuck into some of the thinking that are here now instead of being very innovative and creative and putting our creative hats on in order to achieve an objective, which is to attract more investment into our city.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Yes, you're absolutely right. We need to be thinking about investment into our city. This is an example. So with the Industrial Investment Action Plan that we talked about last June, we've been working away thinking about how we're positioning the city to be stronger in this space. And so examples like this are starting to emerge more frequently around things the city could be looking at on a more ongoing basis. When we looked at this project in particular from an economic development perspective, this is pretty big for the city.
Yeah.
And this particular utility issue is somewhat unique. And so when we looked at, do we expect this to open the floodgates for others? Perhaps not. If you look at
Actually,
specifically-
I don't mind that floodgate opening if that is incremental new investment in our city, right?
Right. And so I guess what I'm trying to talk about is we've got to make sure that the parameters are going to do exactly that. And so we want to make sure that it's going to lead to the growth that we really need to see in our city.
Okay. Because there are a number of options. You could have a different franchise fee, you could exempt, you could create a grant funding, you could exempt new investment from property taxes for a few years. I think there's many tools that we need to explore that are at our disposal that we should be actually looking at. I know this, instead of treating this kind of one-off.
That's correct. And that's the intent under Action 8 of the Industrial Investment Action Plan.
Yeah, but at the same time recognizing it's going to take time for that to develop and we have a situation at hand. Maybe need to understand the timelines. What is the timelines? Do we know the timelines for Air Product to be reaching conclusion or solution on this?
So it's our understanding, Mayor, that the franchise fee and the rate when it would be applied, so the pipe wouldn't be functioning until September 2026.
2026.
And the new rate EPCOR would bring forward for discussion with the Utility Committee would be in the first quarter of 2026.
Okay, I see. Okay,
so
I know, Chair. We can go back to the proponent to ask them if those timelines work. Maybe through questions we can find out, or through.
We think we had some insight into that.
Good. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll stop here then. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tang.
Yeah, since Alyssa, I have you on the line, can you just remind us why Industrial Investment Action Plan is important?
For sure. So it's important because we are looking at
relevant.
our fiscal sustainability in the city, and we've got residential growth, which is incredible, but that growth is surpassing the growth we're seeing in our non-residential areas of the city. So that's creating some financial imbalance in terms of where we need to see our tax base supporting our population. And
so I guess, so I think maybe just like in summary, what Air Product offers beyond just economic stimulus and stuff is also kind of a critical non-residential base. If a utility discussion like this that not only discourages that kind of continued investment, or even from other types of similar large-scale, that it erodes away our non-residential, or the potential to non-residential base.
Yeah, Councillor Tang, I think you're speaking about investment sentiment.
Okay.
In terms of what signals it sends to follow on investors and those that are here looking to expand. And so things you can do that positively support those investments make a difference for follow-on investment and growth.
I think my struggle with the grant option presented in this is that we're not there yet with Action 8 in the plan, and that's coming back later this year, I believe, right?
That's correct.
So if we went with this route now, then we kind of bypass that work. And then, like I think another counselor mentioned, it will come back every year for approval, and I don't know if that's the most expedient way of necessarily addressing it. So anyways, I think that's kind of just where my thinking is at with this. And then I was wondering from just like the AUC side, because you had mentioned that either way there will be a AUC approval component to this. Like, what's that timeline typically look like?
Councillor Tang, I'm not too sure about the specific timeline, and I think the question of whether or not AUC approval is required is still an open question that we're working through with EPCOR. If that was required, it could be months. I'm not sure. It would be hard for me to estimate that. We could get you that information though.
I think months is good enough for me for now. So thank you. Okay, I think those were all my remaining questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a motion to make that I've shared in the chat. So just ask the clerk to put that up. I think you have that. So I will move that Administration 1 work with EPCOR to develop a very narrowly defined new class of non-residential rate that considers shared infrastructure, multiple jurisdictions, and partner utilities. And 2, provide a report on options, including advantages and disadvantages, to amend the franchise fee bylaw to potentially apply a different rate to revenues, costs, or other financial parameters. And that should say to ratepayers in this newly developed class. Sorry, I should have added that in my chat. So I'll just quickly introduce this. I appreciate the comments around how this relates to the industrial action plan. I think that plan is about attracting and incenting non-residential development in the city. And I think that's a good place for things like grants or other conversations. The challenge in front of us right now, in my view, is very narrowly defined and constrained to a particular part of the city that is kinda, sorta serviced by 2 different utilities and 2 different systems. And so if we develop a class of property that overlaps the 2 systems and overlaps the boundary between the city and the county, that very narrowly defines what we are talking about today. And so things like other examples, other industries, Labatt's, might say that we want our own very narrowly defined class 2, but it would be pretty easy to justify that this is only where EPCOR and Arrow are doing stuff together in a particular part of the city. And would be very easy then to justify not considering different rates or different classes in other applications. I think that there's, a pretty reasonable logic path by developing a new class. So I understand that EPCOR is kind of working on that. I would like to keep this in the motion to make sure that we are really narrowly defining this conversation. And then we can then talk about differential rates for differential properties, and we can talk about the implication of that quite separately from the discussion around a narrow class in a particular part of the city, because I think they are 2 different discussions. And the second discussion, the second point, might be something that leaks into industrial action plans or other incentive programs or those kinds of things. So there's a couple of bodies of work here. I understood Air Products to say that they're looking for, in my words, a little bit of certainty that we're examining a solution set for this particular situation that is also consistent with others that might find themselves in very similar situations in a very narrow geographical area. So if we can make that commitment that we're looking at it and we're looking at it with pace, I think that helps Air Products. I do understand, I've said Q2, which is next week almost. I appreciate that this is going to take a little bit of time, and there's an AUC question out there, so perhaps administration can advise back. But I would like to at least indicate that we're going to try to solve this particular situation fairly quickly, while having one eye on the horizon about other implications on other places. Thank you.
Councillor Cartmel, can I just allow EPCOR to speak to the first bullet here? That's something I'm not very familiar with, and they could probably speak to a bit better. If there's
Sure,
if
yeah,
that's the time.
in the form of a question, if, now I'm asking my question, if EPCOR could, give their input. Thank you.
Sure, just speaking to the first bulletin, I think it's very much on the right track. Just to be clear, however, that the rate that we will be coming forward with Q1 next year approximately would be very unique to this customer. As you said, it's narrow, but in our eyes, narrow to this customer. A different customer being provided water service from Arrow in a different location may have a slightly different rate because our input costs may be slightly different. So I just want to clarify the rate we're coming forward is an Air Product specific water rate.
So the EPCOR rate is the cost of water that includes things like the cost of maintenance on pieces that EPCOR is responsible for. That is, you would have a different rate of effectively the cost of water purchased by the ratepayer. The franchise fee is where a differential rate could be applied.
Correct. Yeah,
So would you need a different class of ratepayer for every single property that might have a slightly different, because that doesn't flow from me, because the cost that you have to keep my property in operating order is slightly different than the cost of Councillor Tang's, for instance. But we don't have different classes of property. So to me, we should be able to define a class of property that is pretty similar in the circumstances.
Yes, that's correct. I guess the difficulty here is when you've got a rate class of 1, and for the foreseeable future until a new customer shows up, comparing the cost to service one versus the next, may be different.
Well, the next might be phase 2 of this project.
Fair.
The next might be a brewery.
And so
we'll know when we know.
Going back to the principles of fairness and equity, we want to ensure that customers are paying, their appropriate share of cost. And so if the, next customer that comes along is significantly different to serve, then perhaps then we need to introduce a second rate. What scares me is then you end up in a situation where you have a specific rate for specific customers, which can become unmanageable over time.
We are uncertain of time here, so I'm going to stop my speaking and go to Councillor Paquette.
It's all relative. So, I'm just looking at this, and I'm just wondering if there should be another bullet that says further provide a report on how would you put it, but other options, including grants, tax adjustments, and I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but it seems that maybe we're putting ourselves into a corner here when there's a larger question. Now, I understand that probably Councillor Cartmel wants to focus just on this issue today, but I guess to administration, I'm a little curious about that approach. You've mentioned it a little bit. I'm wondering if we can expand on it. Like, as you're working on the larger question, if this comes back before that larger question is answered, I'm just worrying about what the knock-on effects or the unintended consequences would be if it's not actually part of the larger strategy. Like, is that something that we want to do? Is just sort of take pieces of what could be part of a larger strategy and develop those all kind of independently or tangentially without actually having them all part of the whole cloth? Just thoughts on that.
So I'm not sure if that's to me or not, Mr.
That's to administration.
I'm just wondering if we might just get an update on the when our next conversation around the industrial action plan might be. that might help inform your question.
Yeah, sure. To administration.
I can speak to that, Councillor. So our next update on the Industrial Investment Action Plan will be on June 18th at Executive Committee. And what we'll be bringing to you is an update on progress we've made on the 8 sub-actions under the Industrial Investment Action Plan that we had indicated we don't need additional resources to move forward on. There's been decisions that have been made by council in between that time, so we'll also be bringing those forward as part of that report so you can see where we're at and an outlook on where we're going next.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm just trying to sort of square this whole in that I think that what I'm hearing is a general agreement on committee that it makes sense to look into this on behalf of Air Products. So I don't think that's the question. The question is, what is the best approach, not just for Air Products, but for the city of Edmonton? And, does it make sense to take the time that we actually do have to get it right overall rather than piecemealing, and if piecemealing is fine, that's fine with me. I just want to be cautious here that we're taking the correct approach, because each element is obviously going to affect the others. And I know Orem quite well. And once you start, and this is my concern as well, that once you start sort of tailor making rules for different aspects of the city, it's really hard to shut down that conversation once it's open. Because I think every area will say, well, we have an exception we want to explore as well, which may not be a bad thing. But thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, Councillor Paquette, I'm not sure who you're asking.
No, to whoever is most apt to be able to answer on the administration side.
Okay.
I guess, Councillor, if you're looking for like a more balanced discussion of this, I mean, this is Councillor Cartmell's motion, so we could bring back something that would show, like the other option was a grant program. We could bring back some options of what that might look like. Now, I don't know how much we could put together by Q2, so the timing might be tight, but that's something we can add to the motion.
Can I respond to that, Councillor Paquette?
Yeah, please.
I'm just worried about sort of overlapping reports and, if beginning to do the industrial action work as part of this motion. Perhaps if the response to the motion on the floor comes after the June 18th conversation, then any debate around this, what comes from this motion, would be informed by that June 18th conversation.
Yep. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
So maybe we just change the due date to some point after that, just to make sure we nest the conversations properly.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so maybe I'll suggest we change the due date from Q2 to Q3. And you've heard the conversation, so we make sure we have the action plan conversation before we have this one.
That makes sense.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Burkett. Councillor Stevenson?
Yeah, thanks so much. I think I really like the intent. I think this is the right way to go. I'm just wondering, sort of based on the commentary, so it sounds like EPCOR is going to go away and develop that sort of single customer rate. So would it make sense to repurpose the first bullet to say to develop principles of new classes? So sort of, again, bringing that up, because to your point, I think having a tailored rate for different circumstances is maybe inevitable. As you say, that's going to vary a lot for EPCOR with some of these unique partnerships. But I think what is important, again, back to principles of fairness and all the rest, that there is sort of an overarching rationale behind how those rates are developed. Would that be a useful exercise?
I think that would be part of the conversation for sure. Like, what is the criteria for determining why a customer would be eligible to fit into this new rate class?
Exactly.
So that's definitely part of the conversation.
Okay, do you need any changes to the wording, or you kind of understand the intent and we?
I understand the intent. I just look to my colleagues and.
Yeah.
I mean, we can modify the language if that, removes any apprehension. I would suggest that utility companies take a very principled approach to figuring out rate
Oh,
classes, so.
100%, 100%. And it's
Yeah.
just about, sharing that publicly, having the conversation,
Sure.
confirming that with the regulator. So maybe, that administration work with EPCOR to develop principles for narrowly defined classes of non-residential rates that consider shared. Yeah?
I think that's a good addition.
Okay. I don't know if clerks caught that or if I can type that in.
Well, I'm worried
Oh,
that
sure.
changes the meaning because the intent of bullet 1 as written is to go and figure out a new rate.
Okay, and what I understood is we didn't have to direct that was going to happen.
Well, so my apprehension
Yeah.
is that we show Air Products that we are very clearly instructing
Okay,
something to happen.
okay.
So maybe a third bullet.
Third bullet.
Yeah. Okay.
Love a third bullet.
All right.
So the third bullet would be work with EPCOR to develop principles of narrowly defined classes of non-residential rates that consider shared infrastructure, multiple jurisdictions, and partner utilities.
And maybe just from an order of operations perspective, that becomes the first bullet.
Sure, yep,
Right.
that sounds great. And then this is just a wordsmithing again, maybe just to avoid any ambiguity, maybe to the mover. In the second bullet, you talk about amending the franchise fee bylaw to potentially apply a different rate, but that rate, you mean fee rate?
Yeah, so that should say franchise fee agreement,
Okay,
and it would be the rate within that agreement. So if there's clarity required on the bullet on that count, I'm fine with that.
yeah, is there, to amend the agreement to potentially apply a different fee?
Rate, fee,
Fee.
yeah.
So we just changed the different rate to different fee, just for absolute clarity, because
For
there's
sure.
lots of rates floating around there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sorry. Mayor Sohi.
So the first bullet will be developing those principles.
Yeah.
And the second one will be working with EPCOR to develop a very narrow definition that will help deal with the air product situation, right?
Right.
Okay. And the third one is the coming to council for amending the bylaw to change the franchise fees.
Right.
Okay, got it.
One piece is EPCOR, one
Yeah.
piece is us.
Got it. So, good. I think this is pretty good. The only possible concern I may have in this is that if for some reason we're unable to change the bylaw, right? What is Plan B in order to deal with?
Which
the situ-
bylaw?
The
franchise fee
Yeah,
agreement?
franchise fees. For example, if one, say Part 3, we're unable to, for some reason, not move ahead, what is Plan B? That's where I'm coming to what Councilor Briquette was asking, like, is there, I don't want to having this conversation 5 months from now saying, we're not able to do anything, then go back exploring other options? Can we explore other option concurrent to this?
Well, if you're asking me,
Yeah.
Mayor Sohi, my answer to that would be we are through the Industrial Investment Action Plan. We're already concurrently looking at those options. So we might on June
June,
18th,
okay, yeah.
realize some Plan Bs that might apply
Okay.
here, might not, might be better. I think to Councilor Briquette's point, there's a conversation to have, but we're already scheduled to have it.
So we would have to have that June conversation, during that conversation, also keeping this unique situation in mind, in a way, okay, what happens? And-
Yeah, and
Okay, got it.
And that's going to committee, so there is
Yeah.
a broader opportunity, right?
Got it, okay, good, that's good. Thanks.
And Mayor, just to be clear, so the way I'm reading that second bullet there is, we're just taking a deeper dive into the franchise fee exemption option that we discussed in this report, what that would look like,
Nope,
disadvantages, advantages.
not an exemption, no. Bullet 2 is go define a class, a very narrow class, no exemptions. Like you've got a very, very unique situation with Air Products, which might be replicated with modestly different circumstances. Go define a class. That's all bullet B says. Now you have a new class. Can you then, as a knock-on action, change the franchise fee for that particular class and perhaps apply that franchise fee for that particular class to something other than total revenue. That's what that is. And in the meantime, we're talking about industrial investment action plans and other potential actions to attract and enhance our non-residential tax base. But that's part of a separate conversation, understanding that neither is happening in isolation.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. We're not, we've abandoned the question of exemptions based on the advice and conversation here today. But as an example, a 0.5% rate is a substantially different rate than 8%. I'm not suggesting that, but that's where you get the opportunity to change something that is consistent until it changes, as opposed to a grant which requires a reapplication. Okay. Sorry, that's still, yeah. I can give you more time, but yeah, there was clearly what was asked. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I don't see anybody else on the board. We have a motion on the board. We'll go to speaking to, but I have another class.
My apologies.
Oh, you have more questions?
Just at the same time as you were speaking.
Okay, so hang on just a sec, Councillor Paquette. I just want to note that we are joined by some grade 6 students, led by Kay Loss, their teacher, from Dr. Margaret Ann Armour School, which is in Ward Pahasamun, which is happily the ward that I have the privilege of representing. Nice to see you all here today. Are you just here for the morning as well, more or less? Yeah? Are you enjoying your time here? Excellent. All right. Maybe we'll get a chance to chat in a few minutes. We're talking about how much you pay for water. It's really cool. It's exciting. Councillor Paquette, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to give our advisor a chance to weigh in, if he has any thoughts at all on this motion.
Well, I think this is heading down the right path. I'm certainly, the regulatory purist in me is very, very happy with this, so I'm good.
All right, well, that warms my heart. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Good question. Okay, motion on the floor. Speaking to. Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation that we've had today. It's Utility Committee is always an education, so appreciate the input and advice from our advisor and also our administration and EPCOR as well. I think this is a great approach. I think, I hope that we continue to see some of these more complex, but certainly creative approaches that I think provide services for all Edmontonians and the businesses that may choose to locate here. I will confess, as passionate as I am about industrial development and bringing non-residential into our community, I think that's a separate conversation from what we have in front of us. For me, this approach is really about a logical approach, a fair approach to how we can take creative approaches to water use and consumption in our city. So really pleased that this work is going to be underway and that it just happens to have a knock-on effect that will hopefully support industrial development in our community. But I think it makes sense to do regardless. So thanks again. Look forward to supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Paquette.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great conversation. Unfortunately, maybe not for the students who are in and out, but I find this kind of thing fascinating and appreciate this motion. It's in line with the work that is happening. So hopefully we can find a way that it ties in. We'll have that broader conversation in June. It will help inform this. And in the final analysis, the whole goal here is to see how we can encourage more industrial development and make it fair for everyone, but still a clear benefit for the city of Edmonton, while also remaining a benefit for our partners. So I appreciate this motion. It's 3 bullet points, but it also represents a much bigger possible ramifications. And I'll be interested in seeing what the best approach is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Tang?
Yeah, I thought today's conversation was really robust. Appreciate, Air Product bringing this issue forward to begin with. Kind of opened up certainly my understanding of franchise fee structures, and I didn't know we had another water provider in the region, so learned a lot through this process. I would agree with Councillor Stevenson. I know as much as we're talking about industrial action plan, and in fact, I was the one who brought it up the first time this motion came up, is, how are we thinking about this broader implication? And I don't want to see piecemeal approach to our industrial development. But I do agree, I think this is fundamentally a question of how do we calculate a rate that is quite different from all the other rates that we're calculating. And how do we do so within those principles that guide us? And given that we've never really encountered this, I think it's a good exercise and hopefully opens up some communication. And hopefully this gives Air Product, I know you came for seeking some certainty. I hope this provides that to you. But there's still a bit of a runway before the pipeline goes in and water starts flowing, and hopefully we can get all those answers and come to the best decision later on this year. And I appreciate, on top of that, we have this new, this separate lens, and I like the sequence of this, after June 18th discussion about the industrial action plan. Ultimately, whatever we do on this rate calculation, I think the general issue here does align with Action A, and I think down the road when we have other opportunities or other circumstances, that Action A with industrial action plan will also provide another avenue. So we're not kind of stuck having to do these one-off. And anyways, I think the pathway here provides that for those future opportunities. So thanks to the mover for crafting this on the fly a little bit, and for all the amendments that made it better. That's it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's imperfect. I'm sure Air Products would like more certainty today than we can offer. We are trying to guard against the unintended consequences of taking an action, so very narrowly defining the next step on this while we examine other things, I think, is a prudent approach. I appreciate the comments around a piecemeal approach, but I also guard against a one-size-fits-all approach to trying to make these things work. Sometimes there are unique circumstances. Arrow is providing effectively what I'm going to call partially treated water. It's not potable water. You can't run it into a tap, so it's not the same as what EPCOR does at Rossdale and at E.L. Smith. So it's a complementary service. That's great. If there's opportunities to provide complementary services in particular geographic regions, then that might be considered piecemeal. It also is a targeted solution for a particular place. Arrow is not going to be able to do this, in Devon, as an example. It's just not practical. So taking advantage of that. I think the other thing too is that, we're talking about our industrial investment action plan, which is a bit of a how do we accelerate uptake of non-residential land and start to build that tax base. But in the meantime, Air Products is here. They have come here. They are here. They are prepared to, and are making great big investments. They're paying property taxes pretty quick. They're employing a lot of people. And so if there's a need to attend to a particular circumstance that has come up while they are developing their plans and looking at further future expansions, we need to think about that too. So I think we're in a pretty good place here. Hopefully the work can move with a little bit of pace, understanding there's some riverbanks to that. But if we can offer some comfort and some certainty one way or another to Air Products, relatively soon, the September 2026 timeline is sure, but I think that they need to, manage their work and adjust their approaches to things a lot earlier than that, depending on what the ultimate outcome of this motion is. So let's try to keep that in mind as well, that we've got these somewhat competing imperatives that we're trying to speak to, through this work. So I'll leave it there and seek my colleagues' support. Thank you. Sorry, please vote.
And Mayor Sohi, did the vote come up for you?
The vote didn't come. Yes, yes, yeah.
Thank you. We have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried. Thanks, everyone, for your participation today. Our visitors and EPCOR, always nice to see you. Always fun to talk about One Water. See you later. Yeah, have a good weekend. We're moving now to, I think, 7.1, Coronation Eco Station expansion. Right. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Please go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Utility Committee. My name is Craig McEwen. I'm acting in the Deputy City Manager role for City Operations. We're here today to talk about a proposed expansion for the Coronation Eco Station. So joining me this morning, we have Dennis Jubinville, our Branch Manager for Waste Services, along with Krista Berezowski, who's our Director of Business Integration and Technical Services for Waste Services, along with Chris Fowler, who is our Director of Waste Collection Services. We also have a number of reps from Integrated Infrastructure Services on the call here as well. So we've prepared a business case, a capital funding request that does require council approval. So we'll walk through the details of the project here, and I'll hand it over to Dennis to walk through some slides.
Thanks, Craig. We previously provided council with a memo in July of 2023 detailing our decision to expand the Coronation versus building a new eco station in the Mayfield area. As highlighted in the memo, providing council with a business case for approval is the next step in the process. Coronation Eco Station is one of Edmonton's 4 eco stations, which provides a wide range of drop-off services to Edmontonians, accepting batteries, appliances, large and bulky items, excess garbage, yard waste, recycling, and other household hazardous waste. Coronation was Edmonton's 2nd eco station, opened in 2000, to serve residents of northwest Edmonton. It's the smallest and 2nd oldest eco station in Edmonton and has not received any significant investment since it was converted from a waste transfer station. While our Strathcona Eco Station is Edmonton's oldest, having been opened in 1995, it received extensive renovations in 2018, meaning Coronation is next in line for renewal. Next slide. So traffic at all eco stations has increased with the implementation of the growth of Edmonton's population and the Edmonton CART rollout. This increase is consistent across all eco stations. Coronation's numbers are highlighted for the purpose of this presentation. And you can see how after the relatively stable period, visitor traffic has increased greatly in Coronation, with a full number being over 1 million visits. Next slide. So Coronation Eco Station is not a modern purpose-built eco station, and accommodations have been made to provide service to visitors. With the continued increase in visitors, these operational limits are becoming more difficult for staff and Edmontonians to manage. Some details include a short and shared entrance and exit to the eco station is used by residential and non-residential traffic alike. On busy days, lineups can back up onto 143rd Street. There's limited space on site, affecting both staff and operations due to safety concerns. Fewer visitors can be served at one time, which is another contributing factor to the long lineups. The design of Coronation requires traffic to cross over as vehicles enter and exit the main sorting facility, a safety hazard that cannot be mitigated with Coronation's current layout. The smaller size of Coronation also means that fewer waste drop-off bins, there are fewer waste drop-off bins than other eco-stations, and this leads to higher operational costs as trucks must visit Coronation more frequently to empty the bins. We'll now talk about how we'll address these issues in our business case. Next slide. The Coronation Eco-Station expansion became more viable with the purchase of land north of the eco-station in 2021. The business case for Coronation proposes to use this new land to redirect traffic flow throughout the site, improving safety, increasing capacity, and enhancing the customer experience. In addition to the exterior site, the facilities would be renovated as well. Accessibility improvements would be made, and the business case also proposes installing solar PV panels on the facility roof to generate electricity at the site. We're not proposing any changes to the overall building footprint, but in the next slide, we'll highlight the potential changes to the site design. So this is the current, next slide. This is the current orientation of Coronation. Please note that the shared entrance and exit and the intersecting arrows in front of the payment kiosk, which is number 2 on the diagram. This site is very compressed, and providing all services expected at Ecos is challenging with the space constraints. Next slide. Here is a proposed journey map that would serve as a future Coronation layout. As you can see how the expanded footprint to Coronation would allow for a more comfortable, less complicated customer experience. Visitors would enter from the north side of the facility, drop off their waste, and leave through the south side of the facility, encountering fewer traffic and safety concerns. You can see from the journey map how the overall size of the site would increase. Next slide. The cost to complete this expansion is $13.5 million. For the average 240-liter curbside waste utility rate, this would be an increase of 0.55% or 24 cents per month on a monthly utility bill. However, this is a small project in the scope of the entire waste services utility, and the final 2026 rate filing will incorporate all capital and operating expenditures from waste services. The total cost of this project would be $16.3 million, reflecting already incurred costs on purchasing land at Coronation and preliminary design. We're looking to sell the land previously purchased for a potential Mayfield eco-station, and the scale of this land and the sale of this land would go into a cash balance to help manage any impacts of a future rate filing. If approved, we anticipate construction on Coronation's expansion to begin by the end of the year. The estimated completion date of Coronation is the second quarter of 2027. Next slide. If implemented, we expect this expansion would align the services at Coronation to our other eco-stations across the city. Our dedicated eco-station staff work hard to provide excellent customer service to Edmontonians, and we need to ensure our facilities enable this work. Coronation would be closed during this time to ensure safety throughout the construction. Staff working at the Coronation would be redeployed to the other eco-stations during the closure, and administration would redirect Edmontonians to the other eco-stations or recycling depots with a thorough communication plan. Next slide. This concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Great, thank you. I know this was selected on behalf of Councillor Rutherford, so I'll go to her first.
Yeah, I appreciate the consideration of committee and the committee chair for that change. Thank you. I guess one of the things I feel like, and I understand you're just you're renewing and you're changing the traffic layout and those things. What was the discussion or thought process behind the non-inclusion of any kind of reuse center? Or was that contemplated at one point and has been removed? Just wanting to understand that.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. It was something that we considered early in the, in the development of the detailed design that took us to this point. But within Waste Services, we've consolidated all of our reuse activities at the reuse center that's currently located off of 51st Avenue. So it's a consolidation of those. But each of the ecos do take in items from residents that are then directed to the reuse center.
I guess just as they're I'm going to be honest, I think that's a huge barrier for anybody north of the river to actually get to that reuse center. And given that the demographic population overlays for a lot of the north side of Edmonton show different, economic and social vulnerabilities. I'm just not sure that one reuse center is servicing all of Edmonton. When did that consolidation happen?
Yeah, so when we purchased the extra area from EPCOR, there are additional buildings in that area which could lead to the potential for a reuse center type operation at that site, so that it's not precluded from that ability or that, within that site. But we don't use reuse centers in their other sites right now. We are looking at a collaborative approach with some of our not-for-profits and our the other groups within the city for that type of activity. What is nice, though, as Chris said, is that a lot of people do bring their reusable items, which enables them to have a site to bring them. But to your point, they don't have. It's not a site where they can actually come to receive reused items. But that isn't precluded by having this site. In that we did purchase other buildings that Parks and Roads are currently using that we could consider at a future time.
Yeah, and so I guess to that point, should I be contemplating a notice of motion or a motion in which to have a report generated to explore that opportunity? To ensure that we are actually having that conversation?
I'll maybe pass it on to Krista Berezowski, who leads our reuse program.
Thank you for your question. So the reuse part of waste services programming falls under our waste reduction initiatives, and we're doing a waste reduction roadmap update actually right now. So we've just begun our public engagement and are developing our strategies around that. So the reuse element has been raised in that roadmap. So would you would you be willing to wait and see where we what initiatives we have in the reuse space as part of that, or you're welcome to make a motion as well? I just didn't want you to.
I can't make a motion today. I'm not on committee. That's why I specifically said entertain a notice of motion that I would make at another meeting to debate. So that is why I'm specifically just trying to ask that question. I think it is a huge missed opportunity if one of the other buildings that we've acquired isn't used, given yes, waste reduction. But like I said, I think when it takes 2.5 hours for residents in my ward to get to the reuse center, if they don't have a vehicle, I'm not sure that they're actually going to go there.
Yeah, and I think that it's a really good point. And I think that, when we think about reuse and being inclusive, we might want to look at, look at some different parameters and different access. So the reuse center down south is now, it's near an LRT station and that kind of thing. So, what I'm thinking about as you're talking is that maybe we consider looking at that service, but maybe not necessarily having it attached to an eco station, but seeing where that function can fit and make sense for the most residents. So, and I guess I just wanted you to know that we do have reuse on our radar. It's just in a different initiative, if that helps.
Yeah, and I would also point out that there's no LRT that runs through the ward I represent. So being by an LRT line doesn't help the transportation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I have another round of questions on some of the traffic flow stuff, but thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate the recommendation. Makes sense to me. Just looking at this slide, will this new arrangement provide more? Will it help reduce the backup onto 143rd Street? So there's more. I forget what would you call that, but driveway, I guess, or what? A queuing space. Thank you. On-site queuing space.
Yeah, yes, it will change that. The queuing lanes right now to access the site are very short, and it's intentional as we've taken this through detailed design that the queuing lanes are larger. Great. And that's, not only so then the traffic will queue off of the roadway onto the site, and as we've designed the site as well, there'll be more bins set out for the residents to access. That'll lead to quicker service, which also keeps the wait down and the queue down as well.
Excellent. Really appreciate that. And then I just want to make sure I understood. I mean, I think I'm comfortable either way. But again, if you sort of take the strict cost, what I'm understanding is that's a 25-cent increase on a bill. But I'm hearing that that will actually be looked holistically with all the other cost savings, other projects. So it may not actually be a direct hit or a direct transfer of that cost. Is that true?
Yes, that's accurate. So when we do our rate filings, we take a look at all of our costs. We try to find efficiencies, different revenue streams, and so this could be fully consumed, but at maximum, if it was fully put into our rate filing, that would be the impact.
Great. So that's a worst case scenario that's in front of us, but efforts are going to be done to again balance that out in the global balance, I guess, of the rate filing. Okay, and then I think I'll leave it there. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jans.
Yeah, I support the recommendation here, and I also do agree with Councillor Rutherford that I think we should be looking towards not just the north side, south side, but probably in future, I'd love to see a quarterly reuse station. I'm very impressed with what we're able to offer through our reuse stations, and actually thought it would be amusing to do kind of a line of questions like, is it true I can get fasteners there? Is it true I can get metal there? Is it true I can get calculators there? And on and on and on, just because it's so impressive what you're able to offer. But I guess now I just wanted to confirm that this isn't the opportunity to have that conversation about the eco station today.
I'm sorry, I don't think we quite understand the question, Councillor Jans.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to be clear at the beginning. There was I think I forget who asked the question, but about inclusion of a reuse center at the eco station. And I'm sorry I missed the response.
Yeah, so the response is in the improvements that we're doing, it does not include an area for reuse. With that said, we purchased buildings from EPCOR, which potentially could become a venue for that purpose. And then
okay, so not as part of this recommendation today.
Yeah, correct. So just to clarify, that means like there's a ability to drop off, so customers can drop off items for reuse, but it's not a customer facing come here and select items to pick up from a reuse area. That is dedicated right now, currently to the one reuse center that Chris mentioned, near Argyle. And what Krista was talking about in terms of like the work around reuse, we could take that feedback in terms of, should there be additional analysis around other sites, we could incorporate that feedback into that work. But as of right now, it's like a one-way traffic for reuse items at eco centers. Hopefully that helps.
Got it. Okay, so we have one reuse center that's in Argyle, but at any eco station, you can make reuse center donations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry. I think at the beginning I missed just 30 seconds and I got the double negative there. So yeah, no, I support the recommendation and thank you for the work and thank you to the teams for pulling this together. I just was wondering if the only other addition I have is looking at the reuse center page. Do we have any charitable partnerships or other nonprofit providers that get kind of a first crack at the goods, so to speak?
So the way that we structure the reuse program is we try to fill a gap in the reuse sort of market to put it that way. So so we try not to overlap in the stuff that we take into the reuse center with other not-for-profits. So if something can go to Goodwill, then, it should go to Goodwill. If something doesn't have a place in one of those other not-for-profit spaces, then those are the things we try to target with the reuse center. So things like corks or plastic or jars, things like that aren't accepted in other facilities and that can't be recycled, or where we're trying to slide that reuse those reused materials. So in terms of partnerships with not-for-profits, it tends to be more like, oh, we can't use this, or this doesn't meet our criteria, so then it might go to another not-for-profit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So we don't receive many concerned complaints from others in the charitable or nonprofit sector that we're stepping on their turf, so to speak.
Yeah, we try very specifically not to. So we don't accept clothing, for example, because there are so many other places that people can take material for reuse other than the reuse center, if that makes sense.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Councillor Knack.
There we go. There's the unmute button. Thank you, Councillor Carmel. Just one follow-up question from, sorry, am I wrong? Isn't Councillor Tang on committee?
Yeah, I screwed up, but
yeah.
We exchanged glances, so continue on. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just have one follow-up from Councillor Rutherford's question, which is, in your answer around some of this follow-up work on reuse, and you touched on the sense of where it makes sense to serve the most residents. I guess I just want to make sure. I think in a case of something like a reuse center, it would actually be almost as important, if not more important, that we're focused on where is the greatest need, because at some point in the near future, we're going to have an LRT in the West End that would connect folks there. But that isn't the case for folks further north. And so I'm wondering if are we doing that upcoming work with that lens in mind of where the greatest need is versus maybe where the most people could be served, factoring in connectivity, other modes of transportation, things like that.
So I don't want to kind of mislead anybody. What we're looking at is we're taking sort of a larger look at that reuse element of the waste economy. So we aren't necessarily proposing to like create more reuse centers, because we want to be efficient with the services we provide and the costs and that kind of thing. So, you know, we're very open, you know, like that could be an option, but we can also be open to other types of, like other ways of meeting that need or providing that service. So there could be partnerships that we could make, like, you know, in terms of sharing space or things like that. So, you know, building a whole or purchasing a building and doing a whole new reuse center, which involves staffing and operational costs, we want to kind of balance that out with the needs. So my intention is that our team will look at you know, accessibility across the city, and look at how we can provide a service, like do we need a service, and if that service needs to be provided, how can we do it in an efficient way? I hope that makes sense.
I think so. So we'll have some details, and I think the only reason I'm asking these questions now in relation to this report is because this had originally been an idea that was being considered on this site, which I again I think would have made a lot of sense. But I hear why you're not looking at it at this location. I guess I think this future body of work, I think you've explained it in a way that I think makes sense. It just sort of feels a little uncertain. And the thing I'm worried about is that we get to a report and then maybe we missed some of the things that have been raised by Councillor Rutherford in particular. And how do we make sure that work is getting captured without?
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting, Councillor.
No. Thank you. It saved me from just rambling.
Okay, so the waste reduction roadmap, we're doing engagement, so we're going through an engagement process. There'll be some, you know, public engagement coming out in the next few weeks, and there will be a report that comes back to all of you. So we're not going to just go ahead and start doing a bunch of activities without coming back and discussing with all of you. This is really helpful input, so I'll definitely take this back to the team, and please know that you will have opportunities to look at and shape that roadmap. It's not going to be us just showing up and saying, you know, here's what we're doing for reuse, dusted and done.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now. Thank you, Councillor Carmel.
Thank you. Councillor Tang. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you. Because I was going to steer away from that conversation, change direction. Mr. Beckett, do you have anything on this one? It's okay.
That was a pretty good business case.
Great, great, thank you. I just wanted to understand, so if, when this moves forward, how long is the construction? Is it 2 years?
We think around 18 months.
18 months?
Yeah.
And then during that time, will the current services be shut down? Or are you gonna reroute for?
Exactly. Chris, do you want to take that?
I can, thanks, Krista. Yeah, no, the eco station, the Coronation Eco Station will be closed during that period, just to ensure the safety of the construction when that's ongoing, as well as the residents that might have accessed it otherwise. In advance of the closure, though, we'll make sure to provide lots of notice to residents about what's changing. And I don't know if you've used eco stations yourselves. If it's, you frequently use an eco station, it's your eco station, and we'll make sure to reach to those that is their eco station, that they can be redirected, you know, to access those services during that period while it's closed.
So there'll still be some access provided, so you're not anticipating kind of increasing operations at the other locations?
Yeah, so there will be increased volumes at the other locations because
Okay.
that's where they'll be diverted. And we took the same approach when we updated our Strathcona Eco Station. So we closed down the Strathcona. We then use the other ecos to use the excess. We're going to use the staff from Coronation
Okay.
to bolster those areas to make sure that we have the ability to meet the need of the community. It's
Okay.
not as effective, but it is
Just
it
for
has
that,
worked.
for that 18-month period?
Correct.
Yeah, because I was wondering if there's any kind of like, either additional, not cost, but like, or is there gonna be a significant service readjustment? But it sounds like it'll be okay.
Yeah, we'll balance it out, but it will impact service, obviously, for that 18-month period. For the next, you know, clearly brings an advantage to the community in the long term.
So is that what that impacts to Edmontonians during construction will be mitigated through project timing, just like it's 18 months is relatively expedited for that renovation?
Correct, and
Okay.
we're starting in the fall rather than in the summer months, and then progressing that way.
Because there's less people accessing in the fall through winter.
Correct, Councillor.
Okay.
Yeah, that it's intentional about when we start, because then it'll span over a couple of our lowest usage periods. So it's the least impact. You're planning for the least impact to, you know, the residents as they access the site.
Okay, and then just so I have this clarity, because I read this a few times, I'm trying to wrap my head. No new capital funding is required.
Correct. So when we put forward to build a brand new Mayfield Eco Station, we created a capital profile.
Yep.
And so then that capital profile will be transitioned into this profile.
Right.
Therefore, as part of our you know, capital allotment, we don't have to increase it. We're just going to have to transition it.
And then that 24 cents addition to the utility rate is kind of like, you'll look at all the options, but that is one of the options, or worst case scenario.
So what happens is that then becomes an expense element within our rate filing. And then if we have increased revenue or we can find efficiencies, it'll actually
Offset that.
consume that, offset it.
Okay.
So we don't know.
Oh, okay,
However, if you're to completely attribute it towards the rate filing, that would be the price.
gotcha. So there's still to come.
Correct.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put the recommendation on the floor just for process purposes. And so that is that Utility Committee recommend to City Council that the business case for the Coronation Eco Station expansion as set out in Attachment 1 of the March 14th, 2025 City Operations Report CO02415 be approved. And I'll go to Councillor Rutherford for further questions.
Yeah, so thank you for tabling that motion, Chair Cartmel. Just two other sort of follow-up questions. I know you mentioned that the Coronation traffic is going onto 143rd Street. I've actually seen it go all the way, wrap around 115 Ave. So I think it's even worse than what it has been. So I'm just wondering, will that free flow really change that much? Or how is it changing like that, like intersection with 143rd and 115 in terms of some of that congestion?
Yeah, I'll let Chris answer. So just like for actual math, our queue is going to increase by 42% from what it currently is today. So it's a 42% increase. and then there's an increase in flow. As you can see, when you do a straight through flow versus what we currently have, which is that, you know, the X pattern flow, it's going to be significantly more efficient, but I can let Chris expand on that.
No, Dennis did really well with that. The only other thing that I would add is that as we're going to proceed, you know, if this proceeds, is that we'll be also adding, there is currently a rail right-of-way that borders the site that we're going to be converting to the use for truck access for the trucks that serve the bins. So to have a different entrant and exit, and then that leads to how quickly we can set bins in place, how we can, and how we manage the traffic of the residents accessing those bins. So adding those things all together, yes, we do believe that it will have an impact, a very positive impact on the queuing that occurs on the roadway. And you know what, your comment about it leaking out, the traffic leaking out to 115th Ave, yeah, I believe that as well too, because I've seen it. And it's something of focus, in that we believe that this, you know, renovating and improving the eco station will make a significant improvement.
Yeah, I mean, status quo isn't working for sure. That's fair to say. No, I was just curious if I could articulate that to folks. So I like that number. You said sort of like a anticipated 42% reduction in that flow, or 42% improvement in flow. What is that 42%?
All right, so the vehicle queuing goes from 60 to 85 meters, which is a 42% increase to the on-site queuing. And then there's all the efficiencies that are going to significantly increase our ability to deal with more customers.
Okay, great. And then the other thing I hear about it a lot in this particular industrial areas from some of the business surrounding the eco station, in terms of like crime and issues like that. I wanted to I didn't see it in the business case. What kind of considerations from a SEPTED lens were looked at in this, from a crime prevention through environmental design, in the design of this, if we do the expansion, if any?
I'm going to have to take a look at the details. Chris, unless you're aware of anything off the top of your head.
You know what, yeah, Krista, we would probably have to dig up those specific details about what was incorporated in the design. I guess, Councillor, you know, we do face crime at the eco stations. They are, you know, there's no question about that. We do experience that. Yeah, as we're planning for the site and improving it, you know what, I would have believed that it was included in the design as we forward it to now, but I'd like to take that question away and perhaps reply to you away from this immediate time.
That would be great, because I do have a few meetings coming up with businesses in and around that area to discuss some of their concerns. So if I can provide anything that was considered in this, if this motion passes by council, then that would be helpful for me as the representative for that area.
And Councillor Rutherford, some joy of instant chatting. So those who are on the project, they said that that was taken into consideration. One of the issues that we have isn't that rail line that was behind. People used to cut through the fence, and then they would access and steal from the eco station. That area is being removed completely, and there's cut-proof fencing that's going in that area as well. So security was taken into consideration in improving or preventing people from entering into our site to steal some of the items that exist there. And we can provide you an email with further information.
That would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Don't see any. Motion on the floor. Those wishing to speak? I guess it's for me to close. Thanks. Please vote. Oh, was she? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Rutherford. I didn't see him. Sorry.
That's okay. I just don't want to take up time at council pulling this again. And I think that there is, to me, I'm obviously very supportive of this. I think, like I said, the status quo in this area is not working. I have gone and used this eco station on many occasions, being a resident in this area, and I've heard from many residents that I represent about how busy that space can be, especially when there's the free eco station days, for example. Then it's just madness, I would say. So the status quo is not working. So it's very exciting, and I would encourage all of my committee and council colleagues to support this. But I do think there is something there around sort of this bigger conversation and potential opportunity around reuse centers. And I understand that there is specifically going to be, you know, this waste reduction strategy has components of that in it. But I would really invite administration between now and when this is coming to council, if I might want to do a subsequent, to reach out and work with my office on if there is anything there based on what I'm kind of seeing and hearing in the ward. And like I said, I think I'd be interested even in the historic conversation. So maybe it's an inquiry around the centralization of the reuse centers or those kind of things. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a motion. Maybe it is an inquiry, but I would like to see something, a further conversation with administration on that. I would also greatly appreciate the further information you can provide on any kind of crime prevention through environmental design. I think, for example, if people know that they can't get access to the eco station at night because there's the tamper-proof fencing, they're less likely to come at night, then they're less likely to spill over and try accessing other businesses surrounding the eco station. So I think it is a really important piece of information for me as the rep to be able to share with the businesses I've heard from in that area. So thank you for that. And I'll leave it there. Appreciate everyone on committee entertaining me with my questions and taking some time at committee.
Great, thank you. That's a much better close. Please vote.
Oh, we have all the votes.
Please display the vote. And that is carried. Are there any notices of motion or motions without customary notice? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Have a great weekend, everyone.